Hello and welcome to another UK Column News. Today's date is the 17th of July 2014 and I am back in the office and back in the studio, and if you're wondering why I'm so shiny, it's not because I'm made out of plastic, it is just so hot in here.
Who are you?
My name's Malcolm, yeah. I would have titles, but of course they were left off. Brian, what's happening outside with the weather?
Well, it's pretty hot. It's sunny in Worthing. That's what I'm being told on the screen. It's sunny in Essex. It's sunny and hot in Anglesey. So we're doing pretty well in the south of the country. I don't know what's happening up north, or indeed in the Alex Salmon Juntaville in Scotland. But anyway, well, we've got a pretty varied news. We've got a guest.
Yep, Guy Taylor. Yep.
Who's going to tell us what happened in the court yesterday, and pretty mixed bag of news as per the mainstream. A lot of complete nonsense, a lot of filler stories. We're going to try and work our way through with what is really important. And you've got quite an impressive little quote here from an Israeli MP.
Yes, indeed, and what an article. So an Israeli female politician and lawmaker and mother of two has called for the mothers of Palestinians to all be killed. Ayelet Shaked is an Israeli parliament member for the Jewish Home Party. And according to Press TV Iran, she gave this statement: "They have to die and their houses should be demolished so that they cannot bear any more terrorists," Shaked said, adding, "They are all our enemies and their blood should be on our hands. This also applies to the mothers of the dead terrorists." End quote. Of course, in UK Column's position and opinion is that, of course, we wouldn't support this sort of quote and rhetoric, really, which is surely designed to stir up more hatred and more angst within that quarter.
It would appear so. We'd also say we'd be grateful for anyone who can give us any more help on the rest of the quotes of that speech. We'd like to do some double checking. Press TV, okay, that's the source at the moment. But if anybody has any further information, or perhaps there's some context issues, we'd be very interested to hear. But of course, the Israeli army is also becoming quite an interesting or the defence force, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Well, basically an ex-soldier has come out and has been talking about what he's been doing in Israel, and the former soldier of the IDF, the Israeli Defence Forces, Avner Gavaru, if I hope I've got that right. In this article, he explains his first mission was to seize a Palestinian home in which a family lived and had been living there for 3 generations. They were forced to leave their homes, and then Avner continues to say how homes were targeted with Hamas members, whether they were deemed legitimate targets for bombing or whether the occupants were a threat or not. Again, another truly shocking story, really, that's coming out from that.
But what this does show is it doesn't matter what nationality you are, what religion you are, there are people who clearly see through the rubbish. They can work out what is morally right and what's morally wrong. So I think we're allowed to say well done to this man for actually speaking out, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, Mike, this probably is one of the most extraordinary subjects I think we've ever covered. I'll bring it up on the screen for you.
Yes, so Huffington Post Tech today posting an article entitled "Child Sex Robots Proposed as a Way to Help," in quotes, paedophiles. And this is coming from Georgia Tech's mobile robot lab, a guy called Ron Arkin, and he believes that the development of child robots will almost inevitably lead to them being used to further research in the area of paedophilia. But it really, aside from that rather emotive subject, and I mean, we can talk about that more, it was really the key thrust of this article comes in somewhere around the middle, where they're pointing out that or they're suggesting that the UK National Crime Agency is struggling to cope with the sheer number of suspected users of images of child abuse, and that the Times has reported today that as many as 10,000 suspects have been identified, and that there could be up to 50,000 people accessing images in total. And they say that police admit they don't have the capacity to arrest them all. And really, this looks like a coming narrative that, in fact, this is such a huge problem that it's almost normal behaviour. And so perhaps these poor politicians that are being accused of all kinds of heinous crimes at the moment. Maybe they're not heinous crimes. That certainly seems to be the impression that I get, that the view that this article is giving. And so I just wonder whether this is going to be a thread that appears in other mainstream articles in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, but what an indictment on where these people are trying to take us, that basically we're not going to deal with right and wrong and morality. We're going to create a robot child in order to investigate sex offenders, laboratory rats.
It's sort of like an extension of Kinsey, isn't it?
Yes, experimentation for these unknown people.
I find it a bit disturbing as well that we're talking about sex and robots like together hand in hand. I mean, we're going through this, or we're having transhumanism sort of pushed on us either through the media and or through popular culture and so forth. And I find it interesting that now we're talking about, presumably people having sex with robots. Like it's just another
drifted in.
Just drifted in. It's another step towards that amalgamation between man and robot, which is quite a worrying trend.
Transhumanist society.
Yeah.
Well, what's been happening north of the border, Mike?
Well, if you just move it on there for me, Brian, please.
I've got control. There we are.
This is really related to an email that's come from one of our contributors, Tony Shell, fantastic journalist, investigative journalist. And he's pointing out that in this recent report, and we did mention this last week in the Scottish Express, that links Tam Patton, the former Bay City Rollers manager, to Operation Planet and as Tony says, the Magic Circle Rent Boys scandal in Edinburgh during the late 80s and early 90s. And he's pointing out that he's been investigating matters related to this for over 2 years. And in fact, he produced 2 articles for us. And if we just move on to the next one, Brian, please.
Yep, come on.
Then this was one of the articles, and I suggest that people go to the UK Column website and type in Operation Planet into the search engine and have a read at that article. I have to say, Tony's research is always top class, and although we aren't necessarily able to put all his references in the articles that we put on the website, because quite a number of his references come from offline sources. Nonetheless, if anybody wants any of the sort of references or wants any of the source material, if you send an email to editor@ukcolumn.org, we can provide that for you. But really what he's pointing out here is that the Crown Office in Scotland acted to protect those involved in the organised sexual abuse of vulnerable underage boys, in particular in cases where the abusers were much older men. And the details of the policy can be found within official documents, and this report covers some of that. There's another report related to Dunblane, which was in the UK Column newspaper but is not on the website at the moment. I'm going to put that on the website today. So later on today, we'll let people know that website is that article is up via Twitter or whatever. Really, Tony is pointing out that in light of the dossier, the dossier is going missing at Westminster, that these articles become important again, and so I suggest you have a read at them.
Okay. Well, I think we should have a guest available.
Yeah, next up is Guy Taylor, and as people who have been following UK Column quite a lot should know by now what Guy Taylor's been up to. He's basically been battling with corrupt people working within banks, namely Barclays Bank. And yesterday he had a prosecution at Hereford County Court, and he is here to tell us more about that. Hello, Guy. How are you doing?
Hello, Malcolm. And actually, I'll correct you there. It was the magistrate's court because it was a private criminal prosecution.
Ah, I see. Right, sorry. That's not what I have in front of me. Do apologise, Guy.
That's all right. That's all right. The county courts are den of iniquity, really, so we have to take them to the real criminal courts now. That's the only way we can get any remedy in this country, apparently. So yesterday was a very interesting day. A lot of people turned up in support from all over the country, which was wonderful, including some local people hung around outside the court as well, who some of them I didn't know who had heard about the case. So it's all bearing well with the public, really. Went to court, and it was the usual judge that we get in these circumstances. I've had some results, and I've had some disappointments from him as a judge. But yesterday was okay. He adjourned it for 2 weeks, which wasn't what I wanted, because he wanted time to consider what we put before him. What we put before him, we'd laid the informations There were several informations, as you say. There was one from for the bank manager under the Forgery and Counterfeiting Act 1981. There was another one for a solicitor who's been engaged in fraudulent activity against me, and that was under Section 2 of the Fraud Act. There was another one for a man who claims to be a trustee, although he won't stand under the fact that he declares that I'm bankrupt, or that he's actually my trustee in law. So, and there was another one for a bailiff who carried me from Bodmin Manor for assault, and based on the fraudulent instruments which I've presented to the show earlier, no one will stand under, and in fact Sheffield Court even claim it didn't come from them. So he had quite a lot to consider. He's adjourned it for 2 weeks, which was a bit of a disappointment, but he was frantically writing through the whole time, because I had to inform him of the breaches of the CPR inside the civil court. So what I'm getting to is that I've had all these court cases inside the civil realm. They've all been fraudulent. As I say, we're talking about den of iniquity in the civil court. And there's documents in there that we require, and we require sight of, because obviously when anyone makes a claim against anybody, it has to contain certain elements. The claim or application, that has to be there. It has to be supported by an affidavit or a statement of truth, and that has to be supported by a fee paid. And if those ingredients aren't there, then the case shouldn't have even started. And unfortunately, the court won't provide me those documents. So I've also asked for an order to be placed on the civil court to make sure that they do disclose these documents. So all in all, it was very active yesterday.
And how are you finding the practice inside the courts? Are the court staff helpful? Are the rules and regulations inside the court, are they helping you, or are you finding that they're hindering you?
Well, it's become before, when we were going in and standing under common law and not listening to any of their stuff. Of course, everyone was just saying that we were being belligerent and obtuse. Of course, now we're doing it two ways. When they're coming to evict people, we're making sure there are plenty of people there and there are plenty of bodies there, and we're enforcing our rights under common law. And secondly, we're then asking for all the court process and procedure and all the documentation, which we're entitled to under their rules. So we're coming at them in a pincer type of movement. The court staff are becoming very, very okay with us. I think we've won the hearts and minds of them over. I think they realise that the curtain's been drawn back, and there's the Wizard of Oz there with all the levers. Because all we can ask for them is their compliance in matters which they're obligated to comply with. So we point out the rule, and the rule might be 5.41 of the CPR, which means that we must be provided with documentation, and 5.42 is that it's done within a 48-hour time period. And once we apply those rules, they understand that, and then of course when they go behind the curtain, as it were, the judge is saying to them, giving them excuses why they should be batted out. And some of these excuses are appalling, because they're now saying that they've destroyed files. Well, the court staff, again, we have a great relationship with court staff in Hereford and Worcester, but that's just because we're in there so often. I think they're starting to understand what the problem is in the court service, because ultimately, when we're all entitled, if any of us had a court case, and it'll be a serious court case, it might be for a possession of your house, it might be for a bankruptcy. Well, of course you should be allowed to have access to the file, which you are under their rules. But then when people are going there and asking for access to the file, they're discovering that, oh no, the file's been destroyed, but we've still got the order. Or the order might have been based on something that had no merit, and was defective. And of course they're saying, well, you can't see that because we've destroyed it. And I think the people in the courts are starting to wake up, the people actually working there, very quickly, that things aren't as they should be. And all the security, all wonderful, the clerks in there and the ushers, etc., everyone's spot on. So I've got no complaints with the actual court staff themselves, other than occasionally a belligerent judge.
Guy, obviously there's a lot of people out here, you know, in the wider public who are having similar sort of problems, as you said. They're either losing their homes or maybe losing children and so forth. And for a lot of people, they feel that there is no remedy beyond a corrupt judge. Obviously, you found that there is, and you know, and that leads to prosecution. I was wondering, could you very briefly take us through the steps that someone might take if they wanted to make a private prosecution?
Yes, right, okay. A private prosecution is a private criminal prosecution that will be in a magistrate's court. So it's forget the civil court altogether, because if you're not able to get remedy in that civil process, in that statutory mechanism, then your only defence is under common law. And realistically, you take it to court, and a real court is a court of law, which would be a criminal court. So I can only say what I do, but what I do is I write to the clerk of the court, and I write saying that I'd like an appointment because I'd like to lay a private criminal prosecution against certain individuals. I don't put much information in that, and I'd like an appointment date. The clerk of the court then gives me a date for I can therefore lay the private criminal prosecution. That doesn't mean I have to prove my case at that point. It just means there is a case to answer. And the actual test, if you're saying that the other party, if it be the bank or the bank manager or the bailiff or whoever it is, has committed some act of dishonesty, a thing called the Ghosh test applies, Ghosh, which means that people of reasonable standards would think there was a case to answer. So it doesn't mean they're guilty, it just means there's a case to answer. You then get a date in the magistrate's court, then you appear on that date and take with you a very brief document which just lays out the basic fundamental facts of what the case is about, you know, and why you're doing it. You then perhaps have your witness statement or your sworn statement that you're preparing for the court case, and then you're asking them, upon laying that information, for them to issue a summons against the other party. And we've spent many years now trying to get these things through. We're having success now. We haven't been helped by anyone in the legal profession in any of these matters. And I called the case of, when I was on the other day, in the BBC, where 40 people were evicted from a property. That's completely unlawful in their own rules and their own system. So we're entitled to charge those people with crimes based on that. You know, people should have been given notice. You know, there's a criteria for permission for possession. And so ultimately we go into the magistrate's court. It doesn't cost anybody anything, but I wouldn't suggest anyone goes in there with a scattergun approach. You know, speak to someone who's engaged in this, you know, and there are people that are engaged in this, myself included. I won't send lots of traffic anyone else's way, but if anyone wants to email us, they can email us, and you know, it will take a few days, but we do try and help as many people as we can to get the information laid. And once the information's laid, then off you go. And as I say, it doesn't cost a fortune. We're all entitled to do it, because ultimately we are all the police in this country, but rather, because we haven't got time to go and police in the country, we employ the police to do that job. And we're ultimately all crown prosecutors in this country, but we haven't got time to do that, so we employ, at a great deal of expense and cost, lawyers to do that for us. But what's been happening is they've been working in a culture, and they've been working so long together on this stuff, that they don't see us in the right way, and they're not complying with their own rules. So ultimately, our only defence is in common law, and our only defence is to take them through the real courts, which is ultimately the magistrate's court leading to Crown Court with a jury.
Well, Guy, I mean, you know, you've been battling for a long time, and you're still soldiering on, and it's great to see that there are chinks appearing now, and that you're making great headway. So, you know, personally, I'd like to salute you, because I've watched you for quite many years now, and yeah, I'd just like to say well done, and and keep going, because I know there's lots of people there watching and looking up to you as well, and learning,
Well, thank you, Malcolm. And again, you know, we've all been soldiering on. There's a lot of us been soldiering on, and you know, we were considered tinfoil hat wearers a few years ago. But the truth's coming to the surface now in every sort of realm, and ultimately, this is the problem for them. They've been operating in a culture, and that culture, and as I say, if anybody can go to a county court and ask to see their documents in that county court, and they should expect to find, if they've had any process against them, A, the claim or the application, B, an affidavit or a statement of truth in support of that application, and 3, a fee paid. And if they've had dealings with solicitors, i.e. banks who've employed big solicitors companies, they'll be very surprised to see that the fees may not have been paid. And if the fees haven't been paid, then that means the civil process can't have begun. And this is what we're finding out at the moment, and we're having great success in that situation, and hopefully we'll keep on soldiering on until it's right. Because all we want at the end of the day, we want this right, because it's been wrong for a very long time.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Guy, thank you very much for that report, bringing us up to date.
No problem.
And you've made it easy for us, because we're going to lead straight back into courts. Yesterday we got some extraordinary, very upsetting news for us, and that is that Melanie Shaw is due to appear in Nottingham Crown Court on Friday the 25th July 2014. She's apparently charged with arson and with intent to endanger life, and she's also charged with criminal damage. Relevant sentencing case law indicates a possible sentence of between 7 and 12 years for the arson alone. It's likely that the court will require a psychiatric assessment, and we're going to ask that the public attend this hearing to see that the court does its proper job. This is under the slogan, really, we need people in courts, we need our judges, we need our politicians, we need the police to do their job. And that is only going to happen if enough people attend in order to see what exactly takes place in that court, to see that appropriate evidence is brought forward, and to see that ultimately a fair trial takes place. But we'd like to say that we found it extraordinary that me personally, when I approached Nottingham Police as an individual to find out where Melanie Shaw was, she'd effectively disappeared after sending me a text saying she was very frightened and frightened of the police. The police would simply not give me any information. We had to repeatedly call. We had the telephone put down on us on one occasion. And then suddenly, here we have Nottingham Police putting Melanie up, and the report, we'll just expand this for you on their website. Here it is. Not only do they name Melanie Shaw, but they also give her address. In contrast, when we tried to get information from the police, they quoted data protection as the reason why they couldn't tell us where exactly she was, where she was being held. And we never did get a police officer to speak to us direct. I believe you've had a little bit of conversation with Nottingham Police this morning, Mike.
Well, I spoke to their media team again this morning, and they say that the reason that that this is normal, that they publish personal information like this whenever they make an announcement about somebody who has been charged, and they say that this is so that if there are 2 Melanie Shaws in Sherwood, for example, that there's enough identifying information that people know which one it is that has been charged with an offence and is going to court, so that's what they say. It was a bit. I also spoke to the Information Commissioner this morning about this, and they were a bit vague about whether this was a breach of the Data Protection Act. It would be a bit ironic, bearing in mind they were hiding behind the Data Protection Act in the first instance, if this was a breach. But they say that it's their duty to protect. The police say it's their duty to make sure that there's no possible misidentification of somebody when they make these announcements.
Yeah. It's very interesting to see how Nottingham Police put their arguments across. But of course, we feel entitled to remind people that we have been threatened by Chris Eyre, via his legal officer. He doesn't want us reporting on the Beechwood Children's Home abuse case. So we received an email from Nottingham Legal Department, and as we said yesterday, we're very pleased to report that as a result we've been offered the support of the MP group in Westminster who are leading the fight against child abuse. And we're going to bring up our question: why would a form of vulnerable child abuse victim be frightened and under duress after whistleblowing to Nottingham Police? Why would an individual be frightened of the police? Well, many people have sent us in text and emails today where they're pointing at freely available information on the internet, all saying that something is deeply wrong within Nottingham Police Force. If my memory serves me correct, I think on the scale of performance, Nottingham is apparently on the bottom 3 within the country at the moment. But it doesn't take much to find some very interesting articles. There was this one. Jury blames police over mum driven to her death. An inquiry was launched last night into how police failed to deal with 33 pleas for help from a suicidal mother who killed herself and her disabled daughter after years of abuse by Yobs. Now, this was actually a case which took place in Leicestershire. Absolutely tragic. In the report itself, criticism is scathing. The inquest found that Leicestershire police had failed to properly link and prioritise the mother's desperate pleas for help, and this contributed to Miss Pilkington's decision to take her own life and that of her daughter. In a damning verdict, the foreman of the jury said Miss Pilkington took her fateful decision due to stress and anxiety caused by her daughter's future and ongoing antisocial behaviour. Of course, the so-called Independent Police Complaints Commission said it was launching an investigation. But the bit that was interesting for us is, well, here he is again, Acting Chief Constable of Leicestershire Police in this case. And what does Mr. Chris Eyre say? Well, he says, I'd like to offer my unreserved apologies to the family, community and wider public. But of course, by then it's too late. 2 deaths due to, at best, incompetence of Leicestershire Police Force under Mr. Chris Eyre, or else we've got something far sinister at work, which is the police simply do not care when victims come forward. But if you go on to Nottingham Police website, of course, what they're worried about at the moment is securing your home before you travel on your holidays. We were intrigued to find a whole section which is people saying thank you to Nottingham Police for the outstanding service that they provide. But of course, what Nottingham Police don't post is the hundreds of messages, videos and comments that are being made freely on the open internet criticising Nottingham Police, talking about bullying, fraud, corruption and perjury. So we'll leave the public to have a look via Google themselves. But we were interested to find Superintendent Helen Chamberlain, Head of Public Protection Nottingham, and she's basically launched a campaign which is going to bring men forward to make sure that they're going to blow the whistle on any domestic abuse, and they're going to sign up to protecting women victims. So this is her looking very shiny at the Hucknall Rotary Circular. This is where she brought across her initiative. She informed members of the Man Enough campaign, which is being run in partnership with Nottingham Evening Post, Nottinghamshire Police, Women's Aid, the Nottingham Crime and Drugs Partnership, Nottingham City Homes, Nottingham Forest Football Club, Nottingham Domestic Violence Forum and the Safer Knots Board. And basically they're aiming to get 10,000 pledges by men that they're going to speak out to support women who are in danger of violence. But of course, when I spoke out to Nottingham Police as a man, the answer was they simply didn't want to talk to me, to the extent they put the phone down. Remarkable, isn't it? Well, if you want to have a look at the campaign I'm talking about, and we'll take it at face value, we've got some people here really trying to put a lid on violence. It's the White Ribbon campaign. You should be able to find it quite easily. And there is a telephone number at the bottom, too small for me to read from this distance, but have a look by Google. Well, we know we've aroused interest, a lot of people contacting us. This one is pretty typical. Hi Brian, I contacted my MP last year about why so many paedophiles are let off prison by judges at court. If I remember the reply from the Home Office, it was something like, It's the responsibility of the court to apply sentencing, and all offences have tiered applications when sentencing is considered. Therefore, it's the responsibility of judges to apply the sentence based on the evidence presented and in line with the decision of the jury. That, to me, is a washout. It effectively says the judges can let off anyone they want using the tiered sentencing thing, including paedophiles. I've lost faith in all politicians. Here are the key words. I once trapped a pedo online in about 2006-07, but the police at the time stated they could not take any action. If they said if it's happened now, they'd be able to do it, but I'm not too convinced. So we're seeing the public highly suspicious of the police and, of course, the politicians. We'll just give you another one here. This is somebody saying, I just wanted to say, I emailed my local MP to ask what she will do to protect children in the UK and how we can assist her in these actions. I've also asked her to call for a reopening of the investigation into Dunblane and the Holly Gregg case. Knowing what they now know, I furthermore requested that she ask for a review of all child abuse cases where there has been the suggestion of establishment cover-ups. I'm waiting to hear back from her, but we'll let you know how it goes. Perhaps your Scottish viewers could also request the same from their local MPs or members of the Scottish Parliament. Keep it up. So this is encouraging stuff, because we've got people out there clearly now starting to take action themselves. And South Wales, of course, lots of horrible things been happening to children over many years in South Wales. Some massive police corruption, but the South Wales Evening Post has got a massive article, including a video, which is all about the recent police operation where South Wales police have helped to participate and arrest these 660 paedophiles. So you can go onto that website and see Nikki Holland, the Assistant Chief Constable, speaking. This is what she had to say. This has been a huge operation where we've targeted numerous offenders accessing child abuse images. The majority of these people may have thought they were operating under the radar, but we were able to identify them, and this sends a strong message to other offenders: you will be caught. Well, these are fine words, but we still don't know whether a single Member of Parliament or the establishment has been picked up. But of course, if we look into South Wales, absolutely nothing has been done to investigate the kidnap and effectively abuse of Linda Lewis's daughter by Neath Port Talbot Council. And sorry, spelling error there, the cover-up by the Welsh Assembly. And as always, if you want the evidence that what we're talking about is real, simply go on Kevin Edwards' blog site and you can read the copy of the letter they've received from the First Minister, now finally proving that the Welsh Assembly is having to pay attention for the evidence that's been brought forward. And on that note, we better remind people that Robert Green, who has committed no crime but has simply tried to fight for justice for abuse victim Holly Gregg and other children, is on his 57th day under house arrest in Warrington. Meanwhile, the paedophiles in Parliament are presumably out watching sport and having a good time. Mike?
Sorry, Brian, just before we move on from this subject, we noticed a couple of days ago the articles in the mainstream press relating to Edward Snowden's recent leaks about the influence that GCHQ has on the internet, and, for example, the ability to shut down Facebook pages. And what I think we noticed, I'm correct in saying this, aren't I, that Melanie's Facebook page has disappeared within the last couple of days. And my question to everybody really is, since she's in prison and I presume has no access to the internet, I wonder how that could have happened.
Well, this is a very good question. There are many other questions to be asking about the so-called Beechwood investigation. We understand that the two key buildings on site have now been sold to private buyers. So it would appear that the police investigation into more than 100 victims who've come forward with horrific stories of abuse, including allegations of murder on site. The police investigation clearly not finished, and yet the local council has sold the buildings of Beechwood Children's Home to private buyers, but in some very strange arrangement where it is in association with the council. I've never come across that before in planning, and we hope to have some more information on that in due course. But yes, extraordinary that Melanie's Facebook page should suddenly disappear. Take us into the medical world.
Yes, more happy news, I'm afraid. 2/3 of all loaves of bread that are sold in Britain have been found to contain pesticide residue, according to an analysis of government data by environmental campaigners. Of these loaves, 25% tested contain residues of multiple pesticides. With absolutely no study going into how these various chemicals react with each other when they come in contact. DEFRA's expert committee on pesticide residue in food state the levels found were below the maximum residue level and therefore consider the trace elements negligible and do not expect the residue to have any effect on health. But Nick Mole at Pesticide Action Network UK, who is the author of the report, said maximum residue levels only indicate whether the pesticides had been applied to crops in the amounts permitted. They are nothing, quote, to do with people's health whatsoever, he said. There is the possibility of harm from the repeated ingestion of low doses of pesticides, and no one has done research on the impact of the cocktails of pesticides we are all exposed to. Quote, we are all being experimented on without our consent.
So does the Guardian actually sort of question anything here? Does it?
No, mostly the Guardian just literally puts the two sort of juxtapositions together, and you've got on the one hand you've got the government saying that no, it's perfectly fine. The levels administered to the plants are the levels that are accepted, but no one's tested those levels to actually see what's the long-term effects of them, what effects do they have. I mean, we've in the article which I didn't include today, they're talking about arsenic in rice milk, which is naturally forming, which is fine, I suppose, if you're just drinking rice milk. But then when you add the arsenic with the pesticides, with the paracetamol that people will take, with the vaccines and antibiotics, which is in the meat, when you start adding all of these different things together, you have to ask yourself, well, what happens in the body when all these things come together? And this is really what Nick Mole is talking about. He's sort of saying, well, we need to start thinking about this, while at the same time the government is just playing it down, and DEFRA is saying, no, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But we move on to the next one, and the reason why I put statins in with the bread article was because Nick Mole's statement, which is we are being experimented on, made me think of statins, and then funny enough, I came across this article today. Tomorrow the NHS watchdog NICE is expected to publish new guidelines urging GPs to offer them, that is statins, to anyone with a 10% risk of developing heart disease within a decade, despite concerns from leading GPs, cardiologists and academics that not enough is known about side effects, which include memory problems, dizziness, type 2 diabetes and muscular pain. It has also emerged that 6 of the 12 experts drawing up the guidelines have financial ties to drug firms who make statins or similar pills. Surprise, surprise. According to Professor McPherson, the only studies to look at the effectiveness of statins had been funded by the manufacturers themselves and therefore are biased. However, Maureen Talbot, who is a senior cardiac nurse at the British Heart Foundation, said, statins are one of the most studied medicines available today. They have been proven to be safe and effective and are vital in helping reduce people's risk of heart attack and stroke. Last week, the Health and Social Care, this is unquote, last week the Health and Social Care Information Centre demonstrated that prescriptions for statins had trebled in a decade, and around 58.1 million were handed out last year, with the rise being partly due to an incentive scheme for GPs from which they earn extra money for prescribing statins for high-risk patients. So presumably Maureen Talbot left that out of her quote, and when she said it's the most studied medicine around, she was failing to say it's mostly studied by the people who make them. Yeah, and so I feel that it's the same thing. We're being experimented on, basically, is what they're saying. We've not experimented them, but we want everybody who's got a 10% heart risk. I mean, who hasn't got a 10% heart risk living in this world?
We've been having a problem over the last few weeks that it's all becoming so obvious we don't know what to say, Malcolm.
I know.
So if I sit there in silence, that's why.
I don't know, do I be sarcastic or do I tongue-in-cheek? Do I say it firmly? I don't know, because we've been saying it for so long and now it's just glaringly obvious.
Right, and we've got something else linked to this, I believe.
Yes, this is a really big story. This for me, anyway. I think that this is huge. This next bit was basically what I remembered that statins basically, they lower your cholesterol, that's why we take them, right? But cholesterol, of course, is linked to memory loss because the brain's made of cholesterol. So I find it interesting that elderly people are encouraged to reduce their cholesterol, and yet we have the rise of Alzheimer's and memory loss and so forth going through the roof. So I just wanted to say, hey, there might be a link. That's all, really.
A moderately suspicious person could say there's something not quite right here.
If you were cynical, Brian, I think you might say that, yeah, if you were.
I've never suffered from that particular effect, luckily.
Yeah. And crassly and loosely linked, of course, is assisted suicide, which of course tomorrow sees the second reading in the House of Lords of Lord Falconer's bill on assisted dying. The proposals put forward by Labour peer Falconer would allow doctors in England and Wales to administer lethal drugs to patients with less than 6 months to live who are able to make an informed choice. Yesterday, religious leaders said the move would be a grave error and result in people colluding in the idea that someone seeking an assisted death is of no further value to society. However, this topic has seen a number of prominent figures suddenly change their mind. We've had the ex-Archbishop Canterbury, Lord Carey, suddenly change his position, and now we have none other than the Care Minister himself, Norman Lamb, suddenly deciding that he is pro-assisted suicide. If we could have the next article, please, Mike. Action on Elder Abuse, the Veterans Association, MenCap and Scope have all written to the peers, warning that the current crisis in care may make vulnerable people feel that they have no other choice than to commit suicide, so that they are not a burden on those who love them. And bearing in mind that also in the Mail Online today, which I haven't included, was an article to do with the government who wanted to take over 100 of the what they class as the poorest care homes in the country. I just put that as a little footnote in conjunction with this article that I'm talking about now. The charities went on to say, which I think is a very good point, where assisted suicide or euthanasia has been legalised, there have been significant expansion of the groups who qualify, whether through broadening of the definition by statute or through evolution of the way the law is interpreted, to include people with psychiatric conditions such as long-term depression, and in the case of Belgium, children. This statement is echoed by Dr. Theo Boer, an ethicist involved in overseeing Holland's euthanasia law, and at that point when it was brought in, he was actually a supporter of it, but no more. He is now advising that Britain's political class vote no on the subject of euthanasia. He said he now believes that the very existence of a law permitting assisted suicide turns it from a last resort into a normal procedure, as is happening in Holland at the moment.
Yeah, so we're going to say, please go and have a read of these Mail articles, because there's a lot of very good and important information.
Well, I think when you consider like how it's a melting pot at the moment, isn't it, society, and how much pressure is there, and I think that when you look at like the media and you look at films and you look at all the popular culture, there's definitely a push towards suicide. I'll just say it. There's a push towards suicide.
It's a death cult.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a death cult is really what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're busy working out how to get rid of people, but we've got a problem. Well, we've got a problem with too many people, including children. Apparently,
so the Daily Mail tells us anyway. So government officials have estimated that within the next 10 years, England schools are expected to swell by more than 1 million pupils. It has been claimed today that the increase in numbers has been fueled by a decade-long baby boom since 2002. However, today's article is perhaps a little misleading because back in 2010, The Telegraph printed this story, if we could just move on to the next one, which is birth rate falls in England. And what this article is suggesting is that the high birth rate, which today's article in the Mail suggests has been happening for decades, is largely attributed to immigrant mothers. In 2009, the birth rate dropped dramatically, which experts attributed to foreign-born families returning to their home countries during the recession. Anastasia Deval, head of the family and education at the linking think tank Civitas, said, "We know that the big rises that we've seen in the last few years in births have been immigrant births. So with a decline in people staying, that's obviously going to have an impact." So I would suggest that whilst we may well see an extra 1 million pupils in English schools, I wonder how many of those pupils will have been born in this country, and how much of a pressure is that going to be putting onto the logistics of our country.
Well, this is something, of course, the government still doesn't want to talk about, even though we know that the subject is freely talked about within minority ethnic groups in the country. So it doesn't matter what colour you are, it doesn't matter what religion you are, the factor of common sense starts to say that if you can't control your infrastructure as it is, there's got to be some sort of guidelines.
Yeah.
But the government doesn't want to talk about it. But have they got a solution with whooping cough? Jabs.
The vaccines, yes.
Indeed.
This is Lou. Sorry, I do apologise, Lou. Expectant new mums are to be given the whooping cough vaccine, also known as pertussis vaccine, or DTaP Hep B IPV, or DTaP IPV Hib. Bit of a mouthful. The vaccines contain formaldehyde, aluminium, bovine and calf serum, so the classics, to name a few unsightly additives. The vaccine was originally a temporary measure after an outbreak in 2012 when 14 newborns died of the disease. Now a joint committee has advised that women who are between 28 to 38 weeks of their pregnancy should be given the vaccine.
Yeah, lovely.
I think, what I find is actually constantly happening, right, is that on the back of, and 14 children, newborns dying is tragic. I'm not saying it's not. That is really tragic. But then on the back of that, should we then go and vaccinate thousands of women who are about to give birth to healthy children, of which the drugs contain, formaldehyde and calf serum and all these things that perhaps we wouldn't want in our bodies because they're not naturally forming. It's not as if the mother passes these things on to the child as they're born. So.
Yeah, it's best not to use common sense, Malcolm, because it's very upsetting. If you apply common sense, you realise the whole thing is ridiculous and dangerous rubbish.
Yeah.
So we'll leave that there. A reminder that tomorrow, July the 18th, we've got a big demonstration in London, which is all against those against child abuse. So this is a very timely demonstration. We're sorry we can't be there, but we're hoping to get some live reports of what's happening, which we'll be delighted to put out. And of course, if we're talking about abuse against children, remember that those abused children suffer throughout their whole lives. And if you would like to really do something simple and then feel good, because I think this is what happens, how about writing to Melanie Shaw, a lady who's endured some things so horrible, I can't even tell you about them, but she is not being, she's not being loved by the establishment. She is now sitting in a prison cell, possibly facing a further 12 years in prison. What has she ever done? Nothing, but been a child who was abused. If I sound passionate on this subject, I am. We've been warning for years now that the key problem in this country is criminal child abuse by the very people governing us and running the public sector institutions which say they are there to protect children, but are quite clearly there to procure vulnerable children for abuse. So drop Melanie Shaw a line. I know she would appreciate it, and of course it shows public support for abused children. Well, one final piece of news. We understand through the grapevine that the Duke of Edinburgh is very, very poorly indeed. Apparently military centres are being asked for people to prepare their best uniforms, so possibly this is in preparation for the worst. I've just had a news flash which says possibly 19th of November.
I believe there's an event happening this coming weekend, isn't there, at Glastonbury?
Right.
Yeah, there is, Brian, and you're speaking at it.
That's true. I've thought this time...
Are you taking statins?
Right, let's slow things down here. We're just finished with the Duke of Edinburgh being poorly. Military establishments are being told to get best uniforms out and to start polishing buttons. So maybe there's some very sad news on its way. And right, what's the next bit?
I don't know. You're speaking at the event.
Glastonbury on Saturday. There is an event. I will be speaking. I've got to admit at the moment I can't even say at what time.
The details will be on the event section of the UK column immediately after this programme.
Thanks for that, Mike. That's helped me out of a very big hole live.
Rescue, brilliant, well done.
Okay, well, it's even hotter now in the studio. Of course, I've kept my tie on. Standards matter, whereas the younger generation clearly letting standards slip.
Struggling with, as I said, Brian, before, we're used to being wrapped in cotton wool, our generation.
We'll be back. We'll be back tomorrow, same time. Thanks for joining us.
Can I just, before we go, can I just say that the presenter was not Mike Robinson?
Okay.
People will understand in a second.
The presenter is, yeah.